Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar, Advantages of Using Federated ESB in a Retail Landscape, a Case Study. Today, our speaker is Maruti Kampli, who is a Practice Manager of Integration from Merkle Software Inc. Today, we'll cover in agenda the Merkle story, what is Federated ESB, Shared Service Infrastructure Patterns, Distributed Federated Model, EA Governance, Federated ESB case study, and finally we are going to have a question and answer session where you can raise your hand or else you can post your questions in the question and answer panel. Coming to the Merkle story. The primary thing we do at Merkle is we are proud of affordable innovation, quality and efficiency. We have 85 and Fortune 1000 customers and 500 certified professionals. We have about 2000 employees working globally in 12 global locations. We are a giant IT firm. Industry verticals. These are the industry verticals that most of our customers fall into these industries. We work with large manufacturing and automotive companies based in Detroit, energy and utilities sector. We are doing a lot of good work on logistics and supply chain side of business. Retail industry has been a big industry vertical for us, and so as banking and insurance. Merkle expertise. We have a lot of certified professionals. We do have deep industry understanding, industry proven methodologies, customer homemade accelerators and frameworks that we bought at Merkle. Strategic partnership. We are premier business partners with IBM and also partner with SAP, Oracle and Microsoft. We are also partner with Axway, Amazon and Atlassian. This actually put us in very advantageous positions. Now I will hand over it to Maruti. It's all yours.
Going into this particular webinar, the main important focus is on a federated ESB. So as you all know, ESB stands for Enterprise Service Bus. Now we will talk a little bit about the introduction of what exactly is a federated ESB, and we'll take it up from there. So what is a federated ESB? So the way Enterprise Service Bus has evolved over a period of time is before it used to be kind of like a single domain Enterprise Service Bus where a company or an enterprise wants to set up a bus or integration solution in place. It used to be in a single domain, and that's what actually most of the enterprises work with today. So if you have and if you're in this particular business where your business is growing rapidly across like different geographical locations and across various lines of business, having one single enterprise service bus in your enterprise will not suffice to the needs and demands of the big picture as far as you're implementing the entire service-oriented architecture is concerned across your enterprise. And that's when this particular concept of federated ESBs came into picture. So federated ESB on a 50,000 feet level is nothing but it consists of like multiple ESB domains working together to form a single logical ESB. So so you have like multiple domains that you get set up, and the main advantage of having this multiple domains is you will have one particular domain which is kind of like your entry point into your ESB world where all the data comes in. So if there is a one gateway ESB domain which in turn will transmit the data across to like multiple subdomains, then it would make much more sense for an organization in terms of having to deal with security as a single entity and also have a broad categorization of all the messages coming in and getting collected at one particular place. So that gives you much more flexibility in terms of how you're managing your services in a domain. And the most of the customers that we work with on a day-to-day basis, be it in retail space or be it in any other domains, the main focus is as an ESB or as an enterprise service bus or I should say enterprise application integration team, the key focus is to own the services that ESB caters to. So more and more customers are saying, hey, when you're setting up the ESB, our ESB doesn't just necessarily go out and make service calls to the other services, but would it be possible to build our ESB in such a way that we own those services? Now, if you're into that particular category, that would make more sense to actually go with a federated ESB approach where you end up owning all those services, and this will give you having a federated ESB will give you much more flexibility in terms of the way you want to expand your organization, and also in terms of like maintenance and governance of all those services. It would make much more sense to go with this particular approach. Now, these are the different scenarios. Like these are not the be-all, end-all as far as the use case scenarios under which you should consider having a federated ESB, but these are the most commonly used scenarios. So let's say, for example, you have different domains in enterprise business and funding models for them are distributed or federated. That would be a perfect case. And also, as I said before, if your organization has multiple geographical locations of the same enterprise, for example, we are working with a company which has its IT operations spread across US and Europe and Asia Pacific. For them, even though logically speaking, the data center resides in the US, still the data that is being sent out to Europe and Asia Pacific actually flows through the US data center. So that would make a perfect case to set up a federated model wherein you have the governance set up at the primary ESB domain, and that is the domain which is actually routing the messages across the different subdomains. And again, the third use case scenario is growth through mergers and acquisitions. Like say, for example, your company acquires another company and they have a totally different set of methodology, totally different set of product set, and the way in which they have their ESB set up. Now, if you have a federated model in place, it would be much easier to actually get that ESB of the acquired company as a subdomain into your enterprise, and thereby you'll have all your governance in one particular place. You don't have to bother much about how you integrate the data, central management of all the ESB routing rules. So as I said before, the primary domain would be that particular logical domain or ESB domain where all the data would come in, and it would be routed to the individual subdomains. So these are the scenarios under which you consider federated ESB, or I should say what we have seen in our experience that the enterprises have adopted to this particular model. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the ESB design patterns as well, because when you consider the big picture of how you set up the overall architecture, how do you set up the patterns and all that, this particular ESB design patterns, it plays a very key role as far as deciding on what is the right way in which you want to set up your organization's ESB architecture. So the main three categories, if you want to look at it, are interaction patterns. So they enable like service interaction points to send or receive messages from the enterprise service bus. Then there's mediation patterns, which will actually do data transformation, that is enable the altering of the message exchanges. And then there are like deployment patterns which support like deployment into the federated infrastructure. So we just wanted to present to you some examples of the interaction pattern. So one-way message, synchronous interaction, async interaction with timer or notification timer. So those are like pretty standard patterns that you find in any enterprise. So these are all like the interaction patterns that you want to deal with as far as your ESB is concerned. Mediation pattern, again, it is kind of like you want to manipulate the message in transit. So it actually promotes the loose coupling by keeping objects from referring to each other explicitly. So that way you can actually change many things in flight using these mediation patterns. Interaction patterns. Now, global ESB. So these are all different interaction patterns as far as the ESB is concerned. Global ESB is services share a single namespace, and all the service providers are visible to every service requester across an entire network. So this is a pretty common scenario that plays out in any enterprise that you see. And also the directly connected ESB. So directly connected ESB is kind of like you're setting up a global service registry that enables independent ESB installations to be visible. So you have like one service registry, and then you have your individual ESB installations, and that particular service registry acts as a governance point across. And what's a broker ESB? So those are like bridge services that are reluctant to expose requesters or providers to ESB2 in other domains. So if you have like multiple ESBs and you don't want to to expose the services across the different subdomains, then use that particular scenario. Federated ESB we have talked about. So they connect to a master or to the ESB to access services throughout the network. So now we are going to talk about the shared service infrastructure pattern, like what are the different patterns typically that any of the organization follows in our experience and what we have seen so far. And again, every company is different, every use case is a different scenario. It might work for some, it might not be that relevant for other organizations, but we just wanted to put the broad things that we have come across in our experience working with our customers, thereby you get a better idea of what we are talking about. So the first thing that I want to talk about is this particular pattern it's called a centralized shared services infrastructure. So this is the most commonly used pattern that you go into any organization, which is at some point. So when you talk about this, it all gets tied down to how matured in the SOA journey is your enterprise. So the more matured SOA enabled enterprises have moved away from this particular model that I'm actually showing here, but there are still lots of companies or a lot of enterprises where you have one single ESB setup and you have like multiple applications interacting with each other. So this is the simplest form of integration of services, and it is cost effective because you're not dealing with like multiple domains. But the downside is if you want to have a good understanding of how your governance of the services are and how the data is being flowing across, and if you want to manage all that, this might not be that right fit. And also, if you have like a highly diverse lines of businesses and organizations that actually require the separation of legal data or regulatory data, this might not be the best fit approach as far as setting up the whole enterprise service bus is concerned. So we just wanted to put this out first, that this is the way as a starting point for each and every organization, and then we go and deep dive into the other aspects. This slide actually explains to you how a federated model would look like. So in a federated model, you will have a federated enterprise service bus, which is called as a primary domain bus, and it will hold all the service registry in it. It would act as a starting point for the entire ESB operations. So all your applications that you see down below, like protocol A, protocol B, protocol C, those are all examples. So those are like independent ESBs. So what is the advantage of this? The primary advantage is, as you're seeing there, since you have one service repository, it becomes easier on our part to have a service repository, like set up a governance, and then also if you're trying to set a security layer above, you just set up a security layer above this. So you're dealing with like just one instance and one single point of contact as far as all things ESB are concerned. So that's the whole goal of having this particular federated ESB model. And also, if you want to enable services across like multiple domains, this makes more sense because this particular ESB which sits on top, which is kind of like a primary ESB, all it does is it's the main intake point of data, and then all it does is it has all the routing rules in one particular place. So as far as routing the data is concerned, the primary ESB is going to take care of that. It's going to route it to the individual subdomains. Thereby, you don't have to worry about setting up routing rules across different ESBs or across different applications. So that is straight away taken out of the box. And common services that are being used across the enterprise, that could be part of this particular ESB right there. So all the common services go into the federated ESB, and thereby you will have even that that common registry for the common services. And so those are all like independent services versus. So when you talk about an enterprise, you talk about like independent services and shared services. The way you distinguish between your independent services and shared services is by implementing a federated model. What's a shared infrastructure? So this is actually a distributed federated model. Just an example of a distributed federated model in which you have each individual ESB domains interacting with every other individual domain through mesh topology. So one of the key things is there is some kind of a governance where happening in each of the domains. The data is getting actually exchanged back and forth, but the downside is it adds to the bandwidth on the network, because always there will be like a constant communication between the ESB domains and in exchange of data, and also there is no way in which you have like one centralized governance point. So again, it comes down to individual application or domain-based governance, and it might work in some cases, but in most cases where you want to have a complete federated model, this might not be the right solution. So coming back to federated connectivity, I just wanted to see what are the underlying things, what are the key things. So, so service reuse is again a majority of the enterprises are going in that particular model where they want to actually host the services which can be reused by multiple downstream applications or multiple different endpoints. And then connectivity. Connectivity is also something where its primary driving factor, wherein all the services have to be established. The connectivity has to be established between the services. And service visibility, again, that's where the whole governance comes into picture. And these are the three key driving factors in if an enterprise is wanting to consider a federated connectivity. These are the things where they need to watch out for. So, for example, a lot of the enterprises that we work with, what they're trying to do is ESB team. Gone are the days where ESB is just kind of like sitting in the middle, trying to consume services which are built by the external applications. Now, every enterprise is trying to push for a model where ESB actually owns those services, and the downstream external applications would have to actually come in and interact with ESB to get the data exchanged back and forth. So that's where all the enterprises are going into, and having a federated enterprise model right over there would make much more sense, wherein you have everything in one particular place, and maintaining that model would also be easy, and also future additions or future scale out of that particular model would also be easier when compared to having a federated configuration or a federated service bus, and you have two lines of business, e-business, e-com, and the retail space. So you have some processes which are common across both, okay? And the way you interact with this data is data comes in from here, it either goes to e-business or it goes to retail, and then there will be an interaction between them. So all this is being governed by this particular federation configuration. So it provides governance, it provides security, it provides visibility, and it provides management. So you don't have to worry about setting up like extra governance layer or extra management or security or visibility layers across this individual lines of business, because you are setting up in a federated environment. And generally we refer to as federation architect, because in today's world it is kind of like if you want to set up a federation, a federated ESB, you need to actually come up with a good architecture of all those different patterns that we have actually talked about in our previous slides, and then which pattern fits where we need to figure out, and then we need to implement those accordingly. So again, this just I wanted to explain to you what happens in this particular process here, and how the data flows from the account process in e-com, it flows to the retail process. So the data flows back and forth via the federation configuration. So advantages of a federated ESB. What are the key advantages? Now, governance, we spoke about a lot as far as governance is concerned. This would be the right way to go. And again, when I talk about governance, when you talk about like IBM World, all they talk about is WSRR and things like that. But it need not be just that. It could be anything. As far as governance is concerned, you will have one centralized governance portfolio for all of the enterprise service bus. And then you have your common registry and repository. Again, I spoke a little bit about in a federated model, you will have your federated enterprise service bus, and that will hold all the common services or the shared services. So you can set up your common registry and repository on top of that, and you'll have that in one particular place. And then you have your logical domain ESB as well. So the basic thing is, if you want to have this segregation of data, like legal data, compliance data, regulatory data, and whatnot, all those data, if you want to like have a separate set of governance on top of each and each particular line of business, then it makes more sense to go with this particular approach. And common monitoring model is kind of like, if you have a monitoring in place, it would make more sense in a federated model where you have your primary ESB handling all the load in terms of routing the data to the corresponding subdomains. If that is the case, then it would make more sense to have a common monitoring model on the federated ESB. As again, we touched a little bit on the security management aspects, like you want to set up a security layer, and then how do you do that? Like, it makes more sense to have that in this particular model. And complex ESB landscape made simple. Again, if your main enterprise goal is to have that level of visibility in terms of the data flowing in and out of the enterprise service bus, and you don't want to have a federated ESB model, but you still want to have that particular segregation of all the different kinds of data, then it would require a lot of effort on your part, because you'll be dealing just with one particular ESB domain, and you got to set up all those different touch points in which you have different set of governance for all the different lines of business or all the different kinds of data. And it is very extensible and extendable, and you can extend it to as many logical domains as possible. And then centralized ESB routing rules. Again, the whole premise of having a federated ESB in place is to have that centralized ESB routing rules, and that actually will help you a lot in terms of an organization of when you would, when the data comes in, how you are setting up the rules. If you're setting up in one particular place, how that data flows in downstream to different domains, and how it gets transformed, and having an accountability of all that data.
The security management as well. So there aren't different layers or different touch points where the security layer needs to interact with. There is only one layer which the DMZ or the security layer needs to be interacted and managed, and that becomes even more easier in this particular model. And complex ESB landscape made simple. So if there's it's a growing business or a growing enterprise with diverse lines of businesses spread across multiple geographical locations, if it isn't a federated model, then it would be much more complex to have all those ESBs run in parallel, get the data exchange back and forth, have a governance in place, and monitor all those services. So that becomes a nightmare. And if that's a perfect example where under federated ESB, you would actually cut down the complexity of your ESB landscape or in your enterprise and have this one gateway enterprise service bus, which is going to take care of governance, routing rules, and whatnot. As I said, it's extendable and also it's scalable, so you can actually scale out as many instances as you want. You can extend that ESB to multiple applications. So all of that management becomes very simple with this. And the last but not the least is centralized ESB routing rules. As I said before, the primary domain is the one where you set up the routing rules, and you don't have to actually worry about taking care of routing of the data anywhere else downstream in any of the ESB domains. So because you have one centralized way, so even in future you had like more domains or you had more applications, it becomes even more simple to maintain those routing rules. You have a centralized ESB routing rules. So this, in a nutshell, is the advantage of having a federated ESB model. So here we just wanted to actually talk about how we are implementing the federated ESB in a retail landscape. So here, if you look at it, you have two broker domains. One is a primary domain, the IIB Go, which says IIB/broker, and then we have other broker. So this is actually one of the domains. This is where the primary federated rules are set in place. And also, if you look here, because it's a retail business, one of the core key areas is interacting with external vendors outside of the client network. And because of that, you have like two data point appliances, one in the DMZ and one in the trusted domain. And those are two X552 boxes. You have your internal applications, external applications, and whatnot. So the data flows back and forth through the federated bus. So the primary domain is the one where data comes in. It takes care of routing the data to that 80 subdomains. That is nothing but another ESB service bus. And the back end, you have your SAP retail application where the data goes and then you get a response back. So those kind of things. So this is a very simple example of setting up a federated ESB model. Because there are like only two domains, actually this subdomain consists of like 4 domains. So there's not a complex environment per se, but still it's kind of like it gives them a start. So tomorrow, if there are other lines of businesses and other geographical locations, all they will do is they will keep on adding to this particular domain so that you have all the governance or the service repository registry taken care of. You don't have to worry about, as far as the governance is concerned, you don't have to worry about anything else. So we wanted to just throw an example of how simple or easy it is to implement this. It doesn't require that much amount of effort to put that in place. And once you have this model.
Thank you, Maruti. If you have any questions, please do put your questions in question and answer panel, or you can raise your hand on right side box.
Okay, I guess if you don't have any other questions, I think that's pretty much what we wanted to cover. Again, we are here. If you have any questions or anything, feel free to drop an email, or we'll get back to you as soon as possible. And I hope this particular webinar was informative. If you want to like replay this particular webinar or have any questions, please do contact us, and we'll make sure that all those questions are answered.
Digital transformation and miracles. We do provide the health checkup workshops, digital transformation workshops, and labs and Center of Excellence pilot services. Our Innovation Labs and Center of Excellence team can help you by the digital transformation initiative. Thank you for joining the webinar. You can visit us at www.miraclesoft.com. You can tweet us at team_MSS, and you can watch our videos at YouTube/Miracle45625, and you can like our page at FB/Miracle45625. Once again, thank you for joining the webinar. Have a great day ahead.